and I want you guys to all meet David Dixon. And I'm going to let David really introduce himself, but I will say simply that David has been practicing urban design a long time and really just leading, I think, a lot of the discussion in the directions of much more mixed use, walkable, livable, sustainable, equitable places and all of that. So, but David, how would you describe yourself?
I'm David Dixon. I'm Stantec's Urban Places Fellow, which just means I'm older than all the other people here, and have had a particular interest. Well, let me take a step back. One of the things that has particularly interested me in recent years is just to be more aware of how much the fundamental changes in who we are, our demographics, how our economy works, our values, how we interrelate socially, the things we feel responsible for and recognize as rights, all of which are constantly evolving, are shaping our communities. And there are times when we who are planners and architects and urban designers, and I probably am a form of all three, just feel, we're terribly important actors and, shaping the world around us. In fact, we are the agents of these larger factors, which are giving us the tools that we can use and basically setting the parameters for what we can do. And that it's really, really important to understand what are these larger forces and what are, I like to look at this optimistically, what are the opportunities they unlock if we really learn how to manage change to benefit our communities? And so in many ways, that's what this talk is at least meant to be about. I and a good friend, Jason Beskey, co-edited a book a couple of years ago called Suburban Remix, which was a series of case studies, or included a series of case studies. But what it was really about was the next generation of suburban change. I was about to say growth, but it's not necessarily clear how much suburbs will grow. Frankly, how much suburbs will grow for the next 20 years may be more a function of how much affordable housing we do or don't build in cities. So, which I'll come back to in a minute. And so we wrote the book, and we're planners, and so we of course believe in great urban walkable places. And there's been a lot of sort of particularly there was a couple of years ago, before COVID, there was a surge in interest in suburban living at the start of COVID. And I remember, I'm sorry, this is somebody, a planner in California who has long extolled the virtues of Los Angeles, a city I grew up in and whose shortcomings I can talk about endlessly, said, see, this was the right model after all. And he's
Joel Kotkin, or was it Joel Kotkin? Or
no, it might have been actually.
Wells, what's his? Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, I know who you meant. I know, but I'm not sure. But it was, it could have actually been Kotkin. Anyway, so so first of all, it turns out that an awful lot of the flight to the suburbs, so to speak, was a whole lot of households who suddenly saw interest rates plunge and could afford to make moves they had long planned to make. And some folks who were afraid of density, but COVID turned out to correlate with poverty, not density. And folks who lived in very dense environments who could stay home from work, for example, did just fine. Folks who, anyway, all right, so I see your heads are nodding. Anyway, and since then, markets have reversed and reassumed the pre-COVID course where urban values are rising faster, and the bigger challenge is people being priced out of cities. Suburban poverty since the year 2000 is up by about 70%, just to show you sort of what's happening big picture. I'm going to give this talk in a minute. I don't want to give too much of it away. But anyway, what Jason and I really wanted to help suburbs understand is where's their next future? we're always going to have a next future and a next future. And it is frankly about becoming far more urban because their growth, just like everyone else's growth, is going to be households without kids who may want to live in suburbs, but they want to live in the walkable, cool centers that malls are being transformed into, or along corridors with transit. And so the future of suburbs, it looks far more urban than what we think of as traditionally suburban. And that's not a negative message at all. It's a new era of opportunity for suburbs. So with that, if you have any initial questions, please throw them out. If not, I will dive in, so to speak.
I know the students have prepared some questions, but we'll get to those after the talk. So.
Okay, and I also
unless would you like to have students kind of interrupt in the middle if they have a question?
Absolutely, yes, and I meant to say that. So okay. So host disabled partner participant screen sharing.
You can't. Oh, I have to. Okay, yeah. Shoot, this has happened before. How do I do this? I go into the security.
You sound like me now.
Yeah, allow participants to share screen. I don't know why that always is not automatic, but you should be able to now. Okay,
let me hit share screen. And guess what? Okay, so now all I have to do is open this. Can anybody see a PowerPoint appear?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. So SOS, saving our suburbs. And basically this is a talk I put together for a presentation at CNU and altered, I have to admit, for this class to make it more appropriate. And this is the same lecture I gave actually earlier this year.
That's right.
But one thing I found very intriguing, we did that really helped me get how people perceive what's going on. I'll put it this way, or can understand what's going on. So we did planning to transform a mall outside of Roanoke, Virginia, into a mixed-use walkable town center. And town center was the local community's term for what they wanted. Very appropriate. And we explained to people why this made sense and why the mall had died, and they were, if the mall died, how can anything else happen? And so I was explaining changing demographics, etc. And somebody in the audience raised her hand, and she was probably older than I am, and said, "Oh, I get it. North America is a suburban continent with an urban population." And I thought she grabbed it better than I ever could in terms of just captured what's happening. And unfortunately, an urban population doesn't like to take care of all those lawns and do all that maintenance. So what really made clear that we'd reached a turning point and trends had changed. And generally, we always realize things have changed after they've changed. We don't see change coming very well. Was the downturn in 2008, 2009, when suburban markets really plummeted. And it's interesting, the comeback since from 2009, 2010 to 2000, just before the 2019 to early 20, there were lots of regions where if you did a heat map and said, how have values changed? You'd see right in the center, they were way ahead of where they'd been in 2010. If you took the sort of inner ring of suburbs, they were slightly ahead. If you went to the outer suburbs, they had still not recovered their values in even current dollar, even in non-inflated dollar terms. That changed somewhat with the rush to the with the collapse of interest rates, but nevertheless, that larger pattern largely holds. And it can be explained a lot by what I love to call the New Norm 101, and we'll start with, and believe me, I understand we're going to talk about labor supply in the economy, so this is setting the stage for that. If you look at how America's population grew, and the first of these circle graphs says 1990 to 2010, it could just as easily said something like 1950 to 2010, because there was a fair amount of consistency. the fastest growing part of our population tended to be 35 to 65-year-olds. Well, if you went back to real immediate post-war, it was under 35 was fastest growing. But basically, for generation after generation, there were more people trying to buy single-family suburban houses because that's what fit their lifestyle than there were sellers. That's the key message here. So suburbs grew rapidly. That's where the housing shortage was. That's where values were increasing. And then we reach 2010, and this could really say to 2040. Projections are pretty clear. Where the fastest growing, by far the fastest growing part of our population are folks over 65. Well, guess who loves to sell single family houses they bought when they were 40 or 35? And that's folks who have reached 65 or older. And the large majority of them, when you go out and poll them, say they want to live in a mixed use, walkable neighborhood, maybe served by transit, but it's mixed walkables really up there. That doesn't require maintenance, and that's called multifamily housing. So for that reason, more than anything else, when you look at when I was a kid, things have changed. But to emphasize that, when I was a kid and I turned on a television, and a television was supposed to reflect back to us who we were, it was a somewhat optimistic picture, and certainly I have to say a very white one. But there were households full of kids. Everybody was smiling. And as somebody pointed out to me, only one of the two people who worked in the family got paid for that work, meaning the mother stayed home and worked just as hard as the father. But we had a very homogeneous housing market. Now, that doesn't mean we were that homogeneous, but it meant people who could afford to buy and who shaped housing markets were homogeneous. That's an important distinction. You look at media today and we're just all over the place. What you don't see are lots of kids. So for the next 20 years, 2 decades at least, probably beyond, 80+% of net new households will be singles and couples. That's in addition to being much more racially diverse, to being older, although that's consistent. But what that is producing is the most urban housing market that we have had probably in our history as certainly a country, or frankly the North American continent. And basically the light green, sort of slightly olive green part of these bars are adults and singles without couples. You can just see how they are representing a growing share of all households. And you will notice that households with 2 parents and children are on their way to representing less than actually 20% of all. There are growing number of households with a single parent with kids, but nevertheless, by 2040, at least, if not too earlier, a quarter of our households will include kids. The other 75% won't. Meanwhile, more than 60% of U.S., and this is really North America wide, housing stock is single family detached. So there's a great big mismatch. And one thing I want to point out that is the earlier collapse in interest rates sort of papered over, but as Chris, I'm missing his last name for a minute. There's a sort of an urban economist who's made this point very clearly, very, very starkly, that if you look at who bought houses when, how old they're getting, and who's going to want to sell these suburban houses, we have definitely entered a period, or about to, where there are a lot more folks who are going to be trying to sell to a market that's much smaller. And that's going to be a very big problem for lots of suburbs. At the same time, if you look into cities, or suburban downtowns and walkable centers, urban neighborhoods, et cetera, we are significantly undersupplied with the housing that will be in demand. I've got to remember Chris's last name. And Ellen, I think you probably know what I'm talking about. It's not Chris Lineberger, it's
Chris Nelson at
Nelson.
ASU.
Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you. And Chris
Just
is
retired from Arizona, actually.
okay, and all I know is, remember, Chris is his nickname. I've met him once, but just his numbers are so useful. Basically is projected at one point that this country, the US, would need over by 2040 something like 50 million additional urban housing units to match demand, something we'll never achieve. So really significant demand for urban housing. This is just to re-emphasize that we are aging, but also to point out that suburbs are aging faster than the rest of the US, meaning, these are the folks who moved out the suburbs, bought houses in the 70s, 80s, maybe in the early 90s, who are now, have now gotten older. This is where they went and this is where they are now, and these are who will be selling houses. What is also interesting, and this is going to sound terribly elitist, but it's part of having an objective understanding of what's going on around us. The more educated we are, the more we, I could say, either prefer urban living or have been able to afford urban living. It's probably both. So if the chart on the left basically says that the less education you have, the more likely you've been moving out of cities, the more education, the more likely you've been moving in. Again, that's not just preference, it's also because urban housing prices have been rising faster, so you've been more able to. But there's a great big economic message coming in this. It's, what's going to hit right now. So if you then turn around and look at our economy, yeah, okay, thank you. We are fewer and fewer kids, believe it or not, surprise, surprise, turns into fewer workers at some point. So starting in 2000, roughly 10, 15, our growth in our workforce dropped precipitously. By 2040, we'll still be adding fewer workers than we did in 2010. So our workforce supply, and this is something that, sorry, this is not part of the comments I was invited to make, but having just been in, I'm doing a downtown master plan for El Paso, Texas. I'm in Vancouver, with very, very immigration friendly, very aware of governors shipping immigrants to other states, et cetera. In some ways, they are doing those states a favor because all of the growth in our slow growth workforce is coming from immigration. Left to our own devices, our workforce would actually be shrinking. And let me tell you, an economy cannot grow with a shrinking workforce. There's no way, no matter how much automation you have, et cetera. So back to here, I'll stick here for a while. So next 20 years, 90+% of net new jobs, not all jobs, but net new jobs, that's the growth in jobs, the new jobs available to folks, will require some higher education. Jobs concentrating in one area, shrinking growth in workforce produces a shortage of work. It sets the ground for a shortage of workers wherever demand is growing, and the most visible demand is for educated workers. So this is actually true across the developed world. So not only, let me see if this is coming up here. Yeah. So not only is every city or many cities and regions across North America competing for workforce, they're also competing with Zurich and Sydney and Singapore, et cetera, across the board. And there are countries like Japan with even much faster aging populations where the demand for educated workforce is even more severe. So US currently something like 40% of all businesses with, I think it's 10 or more employees are currently face a skills shortage and name this as one of their top challenges as a firm and as a company. And that's again, we're relatively high on that list. What this means is that if economic growth is largely taking place in knowledge industries that require this talent, these jobs are following this talent. This talent wants to live in cities, urban places, walkable places, or in suburbs in new centers and corridors that are mixed use, walkable, and frankly, racially and economically diverse. This is a pause here. This is something that's new in my long life compared to what surveys used to show. But today, there are a lot of folks, particularly younger educated folks, who prefer to live in an economically, racially, and culturally diverse neighborhood because it's not a bubble. It's sort of the real world. And the ability to make mixed income housing work has never been greater in terms of how the market side of these projects will work. So, I love this cartoon from the Wall Street Journal, Goodbye Office Parks, the joys of urban tech, drawn by amenities and talent. Tech firms are opting for cities, and that means innovation. This is Premier Trudeau and President Obama toasting each other in the first brew pub in a place called Canada North, which I've done a lot of planning. Canada North is the fifth largest innovation cluster in North America, the largest in Canada. Its real focus is 5G. We were brought in by the city of Ottawa because it is located in what started as industrial park, 1,300 acres, became a kind of a low density spread out tech park, has evolved into this globally important center for particularly, again, 5G technology innovation, but they're facing a real crisis going forward. The outer suburbs of Ottawa are not exactly although Ottawa has one of the, if not the best educated population actually in Canada, seat of government, not unlike Washington, DC. Attracting that workforce out to Canada North is no easy task. And so the planning we were asked to do was say, how can we significantly densify Canada North to give it the qualities of a city, to transform it from a tech park into an innovation district? And frankly, that starts with, there are something like 25,000 employees there now. There could easily be 75,000 in 20 years. But that'll only be true if there are 20 or 30 or more thousand housing units. 1,000 new housing units with a 5-minute walk can bring a block of Main Street to life. That is absolutely critical to thinking about Canada North's future, because that future is all about creating these lively, walkable, mixed-use, cool places. That means streets full of life, beer, coffee, food, and some places to shop. That attract talent. And again, these companies and this investment follow jobs, companies and investment follow this talent. So what the Canada North's property owners and developers have slowly come to see, but definitely see now, is that to maintain their supremacy, to really be and achieve even more global competitiveness as an innovation cluster, they really need to be a live, work, play, learn, innovate community. And this is probably going to be quite possible, because now think back to what's happened to the housing market. Around Ottawa, it's growing the same way it is everywhere else in North America. It's mostly folks without kids. And they will, if you can build enough housing and bring streets to life in Canada North and connect it to downtown Ottawa with better transit, which there's every plan to do, et cetera. Oh, and one of the things we built into this is an automated shuttle that will connect much of it within a 5-minute, much of the folks who live, work, play, et cetera, will be within a 5-minute walk of this automated shuttle. An automated shuttle means no driver. That cuts the cost of operations significantly and makes it much more feasible to connect people by transit to each other. It also means that Canada North can be a park once place. So you come, park, go to your office, and then when you want to go meet people, go to lunch, do whatever, grab a beer, you don't have to use your car, this saves considerably on the otherwise very expensive parking costs associated with density. So, but long story short, Canada North's future, cast in larger terms, is to shift from becoming a suburban office park to a suburban center, a walkable mixed-use center that would look like a downtown to many folks. Is this all making sense? I'm sorry, I'm going on, and I don't know if people have questions or not, but all right, I can keep going, or people have questions. Okay, so now one of you is probably thinking, but wait a second, we've heard so much about hybrid work and how that's changing, and why can't they hire folks from Singapore and Seattle to come work at their companies? Well, they can. The reverse is true. Companies in Seattle and Singapore can hire their workforce. These companies know, well, let me reverse. I'm going to start with a headline here. I finally got up the courage to ask some of the R&D directors and HR directors who we were working with, and it was great to be able to work with them on this planning. Well, why do you care about place-based planning? Because you're facing the same hybrid work pressures everyone else has. Many of your offices have actually been closed for much of the pandemic, and they said, "Oh, this has made us more interested in having our workforce live, ideally within 5 minutes of us, not less, for 3 reasons. One, and this had never hit me, but they know their companies. Our workforce is much more likely to want to keep working for us if they live near us and identify with us as part of a shared community, a shared innovation community that is live, work, play, learn, et cetera, but has a sense of sort of shared community and endeavor. They're much more likely to keep working for us and not go work virtually for a company in Seattle or Singapore, because working as part of this integrated innovation community that is many dimensioned is much more appealing. And both the company and they are part of it. Is that making sense to folks? Okay. 2, one of the most important, two, I'll come to that, make that 3. 2, they also know that, if folks, particularly these folks, one of the things that correlates highest with education is wanting to not having to live in an auto-dependent environment. In fact, not even having a car if you want. So they also know they'll have a much better chance of hiring folks if there are great places to live within 5 minutes. But third, one of the things that Canada North reported after the pandemic started is that their innovation productivity plummeted by more than 50%. Now, it's important to understand what this means. Lots of other ways their productivity maintained, and these companies have continued to do reasonably well. But innovation productivity is the flow of new ideas that can be commercialized. So that's right at the beginning of a timeline that goes from idea to testing that idea, to beginning to, in terms of its commercial value, to understanding what products it can be turned into, to figuring out how to manufacture those. This can take a number of years. So Canada North had a big head start. There are lots of ideas in the pipeline, but they noticed there was a real drop off in new ideas. And that's because, and the Brookings Institute done a very interesting study of this, a conversation between two people, actually, I've heard this in two contexts. Conversation between two people who work for the same company is worth a lot less in terms of innovation productivity than a conversation between two people who work for different companies. Now, the second conversations happen because people live near each other, their kids go to the same elementary school, or they hang out at the same, brewery, and they overhear each other at one table to another. They go to the same parties or meet each other at dinner with friends and are introduced, etc. When folks are all living close to each other and in lively mixed-use environments, these collisions, creative collisions, happen at a much higher rate. And that is as important as the other two considerations to these companies. So now, as you can probably all stop and think pretty quickly, you can create these places in the suburbs, or their downtowns, or actually have many of these places the components are there. They need to, what every downtown needs is a whole lot more. Housing is 2/3 of our real estate economy. I forgot if I mentioned that earlier. So where housing goes is where investment goes. If downtowns can compete very effectively, much more effectively with suburbs going forward for innovation industries than they have in the past, with this sort of awareness of the importance of an innovation sort of community and ecosystem. Is this all making sense to folks? Okay. And what this chart basically said is, whether you ask employees or managers whether you want to be in the office or should be in the office, depending on where the employee or the manager, both numbers are a disaster for office markets going forward, because they both say at most you're going to have about 60% of your workforce at most in the office at one point in time. And even that's pretty optimistic. This country has a great big supply of office space that will probably be redundant, particularly older office buildings, class B and C. Calgary, for example, where we're about to go to a conference, has a 40% vacancy rate. They were hit by an oil crash earlier, but there are a lot of cities with very high and particularly suburbs office vacancy rates right now, and those are not a bubble. Those are likely to be sustained for quite some time. So so housing, innovation related workspace, etc., is where growth will occur. Before I talk more about this slide, the other, I'm sure we all know here that retail is a very rapidly changing sector. What the pandemic did was really accelerate the long-term decline of auto-oriented sort of mass market retail. The retail that's growing these days is retail you can walk to, that is much more supported by neighborhoods around it, which then becomes a destination for a larger catchment area. But it is the neighborhoods around it with sufficient density to support it that really bring it to life and sustain it. So this is much more favorable to urban places. All right, so you ask the folks at Canada North, and this again is the HR and R&D directors, and I've really delivered this message is what matters to their, excuse me, to their future competitiveness. It is housing, 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 and housing, and the walkability and diversity, compact, critical mass of destinations that support creative collisions, etc., that really matter. About 10th on their list would be a big floor plate where they can put a lot of workers. They'll find that if the other ingredients are in place. So I'm going to finish with just some qualities to think about from a planning standpoint. We should really, there are large chunks, particularly of our suburban landscape, malls, strip centers, older industrial parks that really require transformative development. Somebody who wants to come in and polish a mall is probably wasting their time. We're doing some planning now, just starting to do planning for the Natick Mall, which was one of the original Edge cities. One of the most it was actually probably the most successful retail destination in Massachusetts for years. And the mall is still sort of struggling along. A life science developer just bought the Neiman Marcus box store, and right in the middle of the mall is putting in life science, because that has much more value than a department store anyway. And so we're looking at transforming the mall and the area around it into or a couple of great new walkable, mixed-use, lively neighborhoods that have a really strong innovation economy. Because if you know the components and you have a chunk of land, you bring them together, the magic will happen. Is this fair to everybody? The market, and again, it is this housing market that is driving the feasibility of this transformative change. This is another shopping center. It's a big box center built sort of at the edge of downtown Boston when the world looked very different, on the southeast expressway, it's now gone to sharp decline, as every big box is there, Home Depot, etc., Bed Bath and Beyond, if they still exist, and as their sales are shrinking, the amount of parking they need is shrinking. So the edges of the sea of parking that surround this place are emptying, and a developer actually was really a retail developer, but is now doing a mixed-use, lively urban sort of village, is basically replacing that empty parking with a new mixed-use, walkable, live, work, play urban neighborhood. And you can see one moving in as the other shrinks, and eventually this will take over. But this to me is actually what the future of suburbia looks like right here. I also want to talk quickly about, I'm going to do this a little faster, about what's happening with mobility. You obviously all know about connected and autonomous mobility. It's important to realize this is not about the Jetsons, this is real, but this Tesla in front of us is not the future of autonomous mobility that most of us are going to be planning around over our careers. It's this happy little fellow or person here. Shared autonomous mobility is much more likely to be the norm than for most areas. For any place with the density of people and riders and destinations to support it, then owned autonomous mobility. It'll be much less expensive, much more flexible, and that means that development will 25 years from now, when we redevelop malls, etc., we won't have to build the very expensive structured parking we do now. Well, in fact, connected mobility, which is going to happen really over the next 15 years, will set the stage for that, because the U.S. automobile fleet turns over every 15 years. 15 years from now, the norm will, and that's not that far off in development terms, will be connected vehicles, which not only can drive 7 inches from each other, because they're all talking to each other, they just don't bump into things, but they can park 7 inches from each other. They don't need 20-foot lanes to drive in. We need 25-foot lanes. Our cars don't, 20-foot lanes. So we will basically drive up to a parking structure, and if you'll excuse the term, say to our car, go park yourself. And that car's got to park itself in the existing parking we've already built much more efficiently than we would have. So we're going to begin to be able to get much more use out of the parking we've already invested in, meaning that the cost premium or penalty of developing more densely is going to shrink and eventually disappear going forward. Is that making sense? In addition to all the other changes these things will will cause. So I'm going to finish with some thresholds for success and principles for community building. You know what I see. Okay, so thresholds is all one slide. So I'll just say you need leadership. Somebody has to start the kind of community conversations that say, let's embrace the changes in our world and help them manage them to shape a community for our benefit. Otherwise, change frightens people. You talk about density, mixed use, walkable, even, that's not the world we're familiar with. Well, that does not mean that people can't embrace it. It just means they need a conversation first, and they need the information, same information we've talked about. And I've had, to be blunt, lots of success in working with communities where this community conversation produces people after a while are saying, we'll make sure we get enough density to provide the amenity that you just talked about. Partly because that density doesn't affect a blade of grass on our front lawn. It replaces that strip shopping center we've always been sort of ashamed of. But people have to get there. Engagement that is real, full of information, genuinely two-way, and obviously broad and inclusive. Partnerships. Many of the things I've talked about don't pencil out initially, but I have never met a community that invested in these kinds of changes because they may not have penciled out originally, but boy, did it turn out 5 or 10 years later to have been a good investment. This is using tax increment financing, et cetera. Transformative planning that recognizes the extent of opportunity today that may not look like opportunity for the last 20 or 30 years, but is potential today. And then finally, authenticity. And authenticity is not looking like what people used to build in Dallas or Memphis or Columbus, Ohio, or whatever. It's building in the living culture, making sure there's a place for the artists, the chefs, the performers who make, who are the living culture of their community, have a place in these places we create. These need to touch every aspect of people's lives, not just their commercial and work lives. So then some urban design principles. It starts with walkability. Walkability, I love this project. This was Marshall's Plaza in Newton, just outside of Boston. It is now in development as a new mixed-use, higher density, walkable center. And boy, this is a community that nobody loved Marshall's, but this is all surrounded by single-family houses. Many lived in by people who are reasonably affluent. Their lives are successful. They don't need change. They need to welcome change. And they had to come to understand the value to them, to their livability of having this place to walk to. Once they did, they embraced that change. So, but without the density, the 1,000 housing units to really make change real, we could not come back and say, you can have a new walkable Main Street here with a town square and a beer garden and all that kind of thing. So people came to understand that. It is about programming. This is also something I love. This is not our work, but Crystal City outside of Washington, D.C. in Arlington, one of the dullest places ever created. And boy, is it paying the price in the price for that in the marketplace now. Talk about a place that was emptying out long before the pandemic. These offices were. So they literally came in and lined all the setbacks. You can't really see it here, but much of this has 30-foot lawns in front of really boring office buildings. They just infilled with life and vitality and a lot of retail and added a lot of housing. And Crystal City is coming back to life as a mixed-use walkable neighborhood. When you've done those things, density and the density you need and the programming that translate that density into life, then you can really think about designing great walkable streetscapes. But if you start here and don't put the reality behind it, it's an empty promise. Connectivity, and I think we're all aware of mobility when we think of continuity of connectivity. So rather than focus on that, what I'd love to talk about is creating places that invite the full spectrum of the community into particularly the new suburban centers we create. This is Sandy Springs, outside of your dear city here. And this is somebody, this is the most politically conservative community I have ever worked in. Who is your commissioner of elections?
You've worked in an awful lot of communities, David, really. This is the most conservative? Wow.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Well, it was when we worked here, yes. And, it had broken off from Fulton County because they didn't, there was a lot of wealth here and they were spending it on, poor Black neighborhoods elsewhere. It has an interesting history. But their very conservative mayor said, we need a heart. And long story short, they ended up using eminent domain to take some of the land in the heart of sort of retail sprawl, suburbia, et cetera, to create a higher density mixed use walkable center, which is now happening and referred to as, and I love this, they named it City Springs. The idea when we first arrived in Sandy Springs that they would name anything City Springs was beyond imagination. And there is a fellow whose name I wish I could remember, but he had been Newt Gingrich's first campaign manager. He was on the city council, and he has gone on, I think, to be the commissioner of elections or something.
Raffensperger?
No, he worked
Sterling.
Sterling, yes.
Yeah, Gabriel
Yes.
Sterling.
Yeah, and we really got to be friends. I really enjoyed working with him. But he wanted the Obama 2 election happened the night that council approved this. And he rushed over to tell me that some very liberal, relatively liberal district in Kansas had just gone for Romney. He was, and Romney was much more liberal than somebody he would have, anyway, unnecessary anecdote. But the mayor really championed, she was the leadership. She convinced council, the community, to have the kind of conversation to create a place they never had imagined, but have really come to love, and it's a heart to their community. But they were the ones who decided we need to put a performance center that draws the full spectrum of our community, has all kinds of performances to this place, so it really belongs to everybody. It's not just a place they come to shop or if they're lucky to get to live. The most amazing thing is they've lately supported a tax override to connect this to MARTA. That is something that when we finished was still not on the table. Public realm.
And that was a former Target anchored strip mall.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yes.
The site was.
Yeah. Actually, there were several. And what was interesting, none of these malls had much economic value to them or strip centers. They were too small to redevelop on their own. By using eminent domain, Sandy Springs unlocked value for everyone, the owners, Sandy Springs, et cetera. Just making sense. So I was really very proud of them for how they, so a public realm that's multi-layered, that has places where neighbors can just hang out and just rich, lively streets. A couple of kids can just play, or two people can have a quiet conversation. This is Dublin, Ohio, one of my favorite projects. This is a new downtown in a suburb that also, this was a suburb built around golf courses outside of Columbus, and that they became to realize was not the future about 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And also places that just bring the whole community together to celebrate their sense of shared community. And again, authenticity. And here it is about, again, bringing in tangible ways the living culture of a place. And I just wanted to make this visible. To the left, Water Street is a great big, it's now like reached 9 million square feet. We developed it. We were involved in bringing it from 1.5 million, which was where UDA had left it, to 5.5 million square feet with new market information, and the developer bought more land. They then went on and bought still more, and are developing 9 million square feet. It could be or could have been a very homogeneous and kind of vanilla place. One of the things that was really important was to build into the client the understanding of bringing in the coolest makers and craftspeople and chefs in Tampa so that well, they called it the best of Tampa. We'll call it the best of Tampa's diversity happened in Water Street. On the right is Belmar outside of Denver. And it's interesting. I just ran into one of the partners in the development company the other day. And Belmar was a really cool early redevelopment of a mall into office retail restaurants. No one imagined people would want to live there then. They built this very cool place. Suddenly, around it, lots of developers wanted to build housing. The Belmar developer had wisely said, well, let's put the parking structures at the side so it doesn't interrupt. But that meant they were separated from the rest of the world by a wall of parking structures. Now somebody wanted to develop housing across the street. So what they did was, it's just brilliantly simple. They took the first floor, one parking bay deep, so 20 feet deep, walled it off, put in electricity and, plumbing, installed artists who, believe me, don't pay any rent. It's one thing artists just don't do, to have work cell galleries. And on Friday nights, they started to get 25,000 people who showed up. And then all went and ate dinner in Belmar. Belmar is now in trouble because their office market has disappeared. And unfortunately, they were just a little too early. The design is just wonderful. But I love to say here, they spent more on banners than on the space, I think. And this is an idea we have stolen for a number of projects. And I can't tell you we haven't found a developer yet who didn't say, oh, that's a great idea. So, and then this is one of my favorite. This is Jason Beskey took this photo. This is Reston, Virginia, one of the first mixed-use, lively, urban, suburban places. And that statue there is Robert E. Simon, who the founder of Reston, hence the name Reston, R-E-S. And Jason walked by with Robert E. Simon, who was giving him a personal tour. And that girl in her pink suit looked up and said, Mama, that man just got out of his statue. Which I just love. But this is the story of this place. So it's authenticity. So, oh my gosh. And giving a face to diversity is a really important authenticity. This is in Memphis where we did a downtown plan. And this is the Memphis Downtown Partnership, which actually had a major voice in redevelopment subsidy across Memphis, very wisely invested in making sure, and these are just containers that turned into a little retail square, that there was an early face to the diversity of this neighborhood in its redevelopment, if that makes sense. And just using these, putting these containers, to plopping them down on a parking lot and making sure there was a coffee place, et cetera. And then just making sure who had a face there. So thank you very much. If you have any more questions, there's my email address. And did I go on too long or do we have time for questions?
We have time. Do you?
Yes.
All right, great. So yes, each of the students has been charged with coming up with a question for you. Now that was before they'd heard your talk. So everybody's welcome to, revise your question, or if you think your question, if David didn't already answer your question, please ask it, because they did read a little bit about the Bridge Street.
Oh, okay.
Project.
Yeah.
So fire away. Who wants to go first?
Can I go first?
Of course.
Hi, David. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Yes. So I'm currently working in a studio project for the city of Savannah, and there are all possibilities that the city might go through that includes hurricanes. Knowing that you and your team have worked on the recovery planning for New Orleans,
yes,
Katrina, what are the strategies we need to incorporate now for Savannah to have a better future in terms of recovery? And basically, how do we help the vulnerable communities to revive the socioeconomic systems?
Oh, thank you. That's just a really good question. Okay, I'm going to give an answer that is going to say an initial answer that may sound more glib than I mean it to be,
Okay.
which is that New Orleans' biggest challenge post-Katrina
Right.
was the fact that it was one of the more racially divided cities in the early 2000s in the US, one of the most. It had not gone through the kind of reconciliation and power sharing that Atlanta developed, for example, or Houston or Dallas. New Orleans was very aware of the fact that in 1960, its economy was roughly the same size as Atlanta's, Dallas's, Houston's, Miami's, and there was another city they would point to. And boy, were they behind by when Katrina hit in the early 2000s. And an awful lot of this had to do with the fact that they had just never dealt with race. And so recovery as a city sounds like a notion that should draw everyone together. If you have felt you lived in not just two different cities, black and white, but 20 or 30 different cities because you really lived in your neighborhood, not in New Orleans. You know, we all know about New Orleans. They knew their neighborhood. It was really tough to get people to think, to find their shared interests. They got there. But we actually brought a fellow named Bill Gilchrist, who some of you may know, who was the planner in Birmingham, somebody I gotten to know. And Birmingham is one of those cities where they just did an amazing job of talking about race and being really explicit about race and resolve, not you can never resolve race, but it's front and center in every conversation and people are comfortable talking about it. So we actually brought him to New Orleans a couple of times just to talk with communities about how to talk about race and how to get past it and, you know, what people had in common, et cetera. Anyway, it was that was the probably the toughest part of this. I will say at a for more, but we know we got through. We just had to really acknowledge it and believe me, any community that has done that ahead. In Savannah, I think when I worked in Savannah, I actually had an African-American mayor who was a sociologist. He was a very cool guy. I don't know, I doubt he's still there, but probably is way ahead on this. But the other thing is to realize that the hardest part of a disaster for most people, if they don't lose their home, is they lose their economic existence for 6 or 8 weeks, or 2 or 6 months or whatever. Their businesses all close, and so to have ways where businesses can, where people, two things, a place where that are safety refuges, refuges within neighborhoods, or at least within Savannah, so people don't all have to go to strange cities, let alone cities. And people were flown, were put on planes and they didn't even know where they were going. They literally, they got off in Denver. What were they going to? They got on highways, and actually, the first time they got off the highway was the first exit that was opened because the city started to close exits. It was unbelievable. Anyway, but what people really wish they'd had is a place to go and shelter that was dry and had beds and where you could get food and have a bathroom and actually get access to medicines. It's a big issue in their neighborhoods. And when I would ask people, what's the biggest problem you've had? Invariably, it was, I haven't had an income for months. And how many, most of us do not prepare to be literally still employed, but have no income for half a year or whatever, and they just really wanted, access to jobs. And they would have much preferred to keep their old jobs. So if you can find a way to shelter businesses and shelter people in place, in community, and give them what it takes to keep operating. Look, we've all learned during the pandemic that our businesses can keep operating without us, or with us working remotely. So we're probably in a much better position to prepare for, this has been a disaster of a different sort. It's well, I guess it's a natural disaster too in its own way. Is this making sense? Is this,
Yeah.
okay. And then finally, I have to say that and this is less important for Savannah, so I'm just sort of say it. The one thing to learn about New Orleans is it's kind of a myth that you can move neighborhoods out of harm's way. It's incredibly expensive and complicated to move a neighborhood, particularly a poorer neighborhood.
Mhm.
To be blunt, you may be able to pick it up, but try putting it down someplace, to be
Right.
blunt. Protecting neighborhoods in ways that create amenity. The Dutch have done a great job. They couldn't afford after World War II to protect themselves to repair all their protections from the North Sea and flooding and rebuild the country. So basically they said a guilder spent on resilience is a guilder spent on quality of life. So everything they did had a double purpose. And I think to the extent, and this is kind of abstract, that you can think about things that, these places I just talked about, if they can be lively community centers for the 99% of the time when they're not housing residents, following a natural disaster, you'll have created much more value. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Or job training centers, or I'm just trying to think. So is that enough of an answer to be helpful, or?
Yes, that was great. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you.
All right, who's next?
Well, I'll run next. And two things real quick. One, I think I may have you beat in age. I'm not sure.
What's that?
I said I may have you beat in age. I'm not sure, but we're close.
Oh, I bet I'm ahead of you, but that's all right.
Anyway, hey, so I have Midwestern roots. Spent most of my time in Iowa and Missouri, Kansas City.
Mhm.
And this week I was talking to a senior engineer, VP at work, and we were talking about Lawrence, Kansas.
Mhm.
And Lawrence, Kansas, about 2000 was a very vibrant downtown. I mean, it had the walkability, the
Mhm.
loft apartments, all of the hip stores. It
Mhm.
was a really great place to be at. Midstate Brewery, everything that I think you talked about today. And today, there's nothing left down there.
Really?
And the gentleman I was talking to stated that, it was a failed experiment. And I asked him, I go, but I thought Lawrence was a very liberal town. He goes, yes, we've got rid of all the liberals. And I think this goes back to the politics. These vibrant communities, I absolutely agree with you. It's racially diverse. It has to be welcoming communities.
Yeah.
So I worry, and I guess kind of your perspective, do we have pockets of, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, but we have pockets of politics that are trying to push this country in a different direction where these types of conditions, these urban locations, I agree with you. We are a suburban country with urban desires.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm there with you. But do we have a political environment that is causing a rift into a different direction?
Well, that's very interesting. Okay, first of all, Sterling, I guess was named the district that he came to tell me about that I guess had gone for Romney was Lawrence, was your community. Dublin, Ohio, Sandy Springs. Trying to think of some other suburban communities I worked in. But I've worked in a number that certainly have all voted Republican in national elections. I'll put it that way. Sandy Springs is certainly far more conservative than Dublin. I have found that if you can convey a proposal around its pragmatic value, as opposed to obviously casting in logical terms is not appropriate, fair, or useful, but particularly as opposed to broader values, let's say, but just to say, look, yeah, here's here's who your community is, here's what you really need, this is how you strengthen housing values. One of the most successful arguments that really helped people in Dublin, Ohio, was to realize, aging population, suburban single-family housing over the long term is not where the future is. Walkable communities are going to have much stronger, be much more competitive in the marketplace. So let's make Dublin, we don't want to change any of our single-family neighborhoods. We all love them, but let's create a walkable heart so Dublin's a more competitive suburb than other suburbs. It was that kind of argument that a lot of people got. So remember the woman on the planning board who kept saying, thinking about, it was head of the planning board, and she got very frustrated with her at various times, but who just had a hard time believing that Dublin would ever want a walkable, mixed-use, lively center. Just wasn't, why anyone moved there. And then one day she said, oh, you know what? My husband and I can put our 3 kids on bikes and we can use the city, they have a great bike pass system. We ride our bikes there and get ice cream. I had to explain it. That suddenly she changed her own mind around that, meaning that was amenity that enhanced her quality of life. Is that making sense? Now, I don't know if this is helpful to you in a direct sense. We did a downtown plan for Wichita, Kansas that has actually been really successful. And somebody who was very conservative wrote an article and said, oh, look, Wichita just created a plan that was anti-car downtown. That's going to kill its future. They listened to all those silly new urbanists, which is what we were called. And a bunch of folks from Wichita who participated in the process responded. We didn't have to respond and said, no, you don't understand. This is how a downtown will thrive going forward. So they owned the argument. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and actually I'm familiar with Wichita.
Ah, okay.
And I remember the arguments when that went in. It was a great experience.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to keep touch with you. Thank you. Lawrence, that is really disturbing because when I worked in Kansas City and another place and Wichita, that was really held up as a model. I'll put it that way.
Wichita would hold up. There was a lot of engineers, Boeing and Cessna.
Yeah.
It had the. I hate to pin this in, but it had a lot of educated people in it. Yeah. Lawrence was an extremely liberal college for the middle of Kansas, and in fact, it used to be referred to as the blueberry and the Kansas tomato soup.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in. One thing you remind me of this, it sounds like the reverse, but it's the same argument. If you have a really cool center, what's often happening is a little bit the reverse. Well, maybe not. No, okay. No, there are lots of places actually where a revived downtown can be viewed as alien to much of the city and region because new people are moving in and stores are cool and etc. One of the things that has been very important is to make sure that these places are mixed income, have cultural and arts dimensions that appeal to the full range of the community so that everybody can see themselves in the center, which means that when city council votes, and on public dollars, the downtown gets more than one vote. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has to see really tangibly what's in it for them in having this successful heart. Is this making sense?
Yeah, in fact, what I also see, I often get asked whether retrofitting the suburbs is simply stealing market share away from downtowns.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't do that. And I say, look, 99% of the time, it's the authentic, once the authentic downtown proves the market for urban living,
mm-hmm.
it becomes so attractive, it becomes really expensive.
Yeah.
And it's the suburbs that are able to produce the instant urbanism that is not quite as authentic as the
Yeah.
downtown, but is also usually it can be delivered at a cheaper price point.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are also a lot of people who would just prefer to live there.
Yeah.
But they don't want to be stuck in a single family house, particularly if they're older. But no, I think that's very true. And there's so much demand to go around now. We can't meet it anywhere fully. So
The political things I think are also, I mean, they're both real, but not 100% consistent at all. I mean, if you look at any of the maps, you know, whenever there's a big presidential election, yes, the stereotype that cities are blue and the lower the density, the more red, it's pretty true. But there are plenty of, lots of retrofits that have happened with in very, very politically conservative places, precisely as you said. I mean, I can point out your experiences, David, but I did have at one point, I gave a lecture in Richmond, Virginia on showing a bunch of retrofits, and the next morning met with a whole bunch of the city council folks from the neighboring suburbs. And one woman started off a conversation by saying, well, I just thought your lecture was fascinating. Your examples were really very interesting and very attractive, but I'm a Republican, and if any project was proposed in my district, like what you showed, I would have to vote it down because the people who would be moving in would vote Democrat, and I can't support that for my constituents. And she was just 100% upfront about that she saw multifamily meant Democrats would be moving in. People who like sharing a public realm and sharing transit in a more urban lifestyle, tend to be more Democrat side than if it was just single. She said, you know, if you just give me single family homes, I'm all for it.
Yeah. I actually gave a talk in Richmond to local ULI and had a very similar discussion, and actually went around touring a series of suburban centers that were being redeveloped and talking about the political challenges of doing it in very much the same terms. Their progress was being made, however. I mean, part of it, of course, is that people like to age in their community of both political parties, and no matter what we are, we're still getting older.
David, I'm going to call on Anu, but not to ask you Anu, I'd like you to ask a question, but not the one. I want you to ask your first question, not the one that you actually were targeting for David.
It's funny because I was going to ask the first question anyway, because so I really appreciated all the like graphs and like data visualizations in your presentation and stuff. So I'm wondering, I was wondering if you could kind of explain how one calculates the amount of jobs that are created or projected in these like urban design redevelopment projects. Like, I kind of just don't understand how, like, because some of these projects are like, oh, this created this many jobs, or like this many thousand jobs, and I'm like, I don't understand where they get that number from.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, it's a lot easier to calculate things that literally derive from each other. So if you start with the number of housing units, and you know you've got that demand, you can translate that into retail. You can translate that into different types of retail and be reasonably confident of what you're doing. It's much harder to translate that into employment. And for employment, I think you need to start from a very different direction, which is to see, economic development consultants are very different from real estate development consultants. So economic development consultants are the ones who are telling you what jobs are going to be coming to your city or region, who is going to be creating these jobs in terms of types of companies, what kind of workforce they need, where this workforce will want to live, etc. From a big picture standpoint, you can be pretty likely to say that if you can create the critical mass of housing, particularly in the downtown, new suburban centers that retrofits that Ellen is talking about, at a scale that will bring local streets to life with a variety of places to eat, drink, etc., you're probably going to attract enough talent. Gonna pull back from this in a minute, to attract all the jobs they need. I'll put it that way. Because once again, we have a labor shortage. So companies will go where the labor wants to go. This is not answering your question the way you wanted it to, but I'm trying to do the best I can. This is particularly true in regions like Seattle or Boston or Atlanta, where you have a pretty strong knowledge innovation economy. If you create a new place where that economy will grow, it's looking, there's a shortage of space for it, and they'll go where if more their talent starts to show up someplace, they'll show up too. The way it's traditionally done is, and for years, the assumption was these jobs were in offices. If you built 100,000 square feet of office space, that meant first 3, then 5, then 8,000 jobs, depending, because the density of jobs. And it was sort of that dumb and simple. You assume that this office space will all rent. That era is over. So it's a lot harder to project net new jobs. You can certainly project that if you don't create enough vitality, you're very unlikely to attract many new jobs, because once again, jobs go where amenity goes, just like people. Is that helping you at all?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that makes sense. And the fact that there's uncertainty in it also kind of makes sense, because I'm like now thinking about how people don't necessarily live where they work if they're working from home or working on like remotely. So
yeah,
that changes things and how they
yeah.
calculated.
So this is a gratuitous comment, but for a while there was a concern, with this is early, particularly in the pandemic, oh my God, all this hybrid work, people working from home, et cetera, they're all going to get up, they're all living in the city to be near their job, they're going to get up and move to the suburbs. Well, it turns out there are probably more people living in the suburbs to be near their jobs who would rather live in the city than vice versa. So if anything, it's worked the reverse.
Yeah.
Aishwarya had a question related to COVID. Aishwarya?
Hi. Yes, so I had a question. So the question is, so how was planning changed after COVID, as more and more jobs are remote? And since the workforce, they stay far from work, and how has it affected the tax generated economy, and because of that, the planning?
That's a very good question. Well, it's affected it in lots of different ways. Planning, of course, like everything in life, is much more fragmented than the word planning, than the umbrella word. So I can tell you how it's affected work we are doing, and both the kinds of work and the outcomes. For one thing, it has certainly changed. I mean, the pandemic obviously changed travel patterns. It ended the AM and PM, work commutes. What it didn't change that much, in fact, if anything, they went up, were all the trips off peak. And it turned out, a whole lot more people were going, particularly to downtowns and other, to shop and play and things like that, as they began to come back. Not this is more 2021 and 2022. We're, for example, looking at a project to take down the Scajaquada Expressway in Buffalo. Buffalo came up earlier. And it turns out that this is a highway built in the 1950s to get people from the suburbs to a downtown that was in trouble. It turns out that as Buffalo has evolved, that even before the pandemic, most trips, the large majority of trips on the Scajaquada, did not go from the suburbs all the way to downtown. They got on and off. They were using it as a city street that they got on and off. The ramps were like intersections. But no one had gone out and counted that. So the assumption was, oh, this is still absolutely necessary to the vitality of downtown. So one reason we are probably going to be able to take it down is that it simply doesn't, and this was even before the pandemic, but certainly with the changed commute patterns post-pandemic, it's simply not necessary. It's not relevant to how people travel and work. Secondly, I would observe, and this is conjecture, you live in a relatively warm environment. I live in Boston, I was working in places like Buffalo, et cetera. I remember putting on several layers of jackets to eat outdoors when that became possible, because I and lots of other people who did the same thing just wanted to be out in shared community. And I think we came to see how much we value a chance to just be with each other, to share community, to have places where we can come together. And in some ways, I began to think that urban neighborhoods with great main streets were sort of, the new small towns, because, people were just pouring out to come and be on the street and walk around and see each other, et cetera. But it sort of really emphasized the value we place on, you know what, my battery
Yep.
is likely to, and if I plug it in, I may lose.
David, I think maybe we just give you a big thank you.